Hello, my little pretties. What's up? It's your mistress, the Queen of Lions. Welcome to another episode of Shadow Tales. And today, I am going to be telling you all the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This is by the Brothers Grimm. Feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let's dive into the story. Once upon a time, in a great castle, a princess daughter grew up and stayed connected. In spite of all the jealousy from her stepmother, she was very pretty. Her blue eyes, long black hair, and her skin was delicate and fair, so she was called Snow White. Everyone was quite sure she'd become very beautiful. Although her stepmother was a wicked woman, she was way too beautiful, and the magic mirror told her this every day. Whenever she asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the loveliest lady in the land?" The reply has always been, "You are, your majesty," until the dreadful day when she heard say it, "Snow White is the loveliest of the land." The stepmother was furious, and wild with jealousy, began plotting to get rid of Snow White. Calling one of her trusty servants, she bribed him with a rich reward to take Snow White into the forest, far away from the castle, and unseen he was to put her to death. The greedy servant, attracted to a reward, agreed to do this deed. He led Snow White away. However, when they came to the spot, the man's courage failed him, and leaving Snow White sitting beside the tree, he mumbled an excuse and ran off. Although then Snow White realized that she was alone in the forest. Night came, but the servant did not return, and Snow White was alone in the dark and began to cry. She thought that she could feel terrible eyes spying on her. Then she heard strange sounds and rustling that made her heart thump. At last, overcome by the tiredness, she fell asleep curled under a tree. Snow White slept peacefully, but awakened from time to time with a start, staring up into the darkness around her. Several times she thought she felt something, or somebody touched her as she slept. At last dawn awoke in the forest and the sound of the birds, and Snow White did too. Awoke the whole world was stirring in her life, and the little girl was glad to see how silly her fears had been. However, thick the trees were around the wall around her. As she tried to find out where she was, she came upon a path and walked along it hopefully. One day she walked until she came a clearing. Stood a strange cottage with a tiny door, tiny windows, and a tiny chimney pot. Everything about the cottage was tinier than she ought to thought be. Snow White pushed open the door. "I wonder who lives in here," she said to herself, peeping around the kitchen. "What tiny plates and spoons! There must be 7 of them. The table is laid for 7 people." Upstairs there was a bedroom with 7 neat little beds. Going back to the kitchen, Snow White had an idea. "I'll make them something to eat, and when they come home, they'll be glad to find a meal already." Towards dusk, 7 tiny men marched on the way home, singing. But when they opened the door, to their surprise, they found a bowl of hot, steaming soup on the table, and the whole house spick and span. Upstairs was Snow White, fast asleep on one of the beds. The chef dwarf approached her gently. "Who are you?" he asked. Snow White told them her sad story, and tears sprang to the dwarf's eyes. Then one of them said and noisily blew his nose, "Stay here with us." "Hooray! Hooray!" they cheered, dancing joyfully around the little girl. The dwarf said to Snow White, "You can live here and tend to the house while we're down in the mine. Don't worry about your stepmother leaving you in the forest. We love you and we'll take care of you." Snow White gratefully accepted their hospitality, and the next morning the dwarfs set off to work. But they warned Snow White not to open the door to strangers. Meanwhile, the servant had returned to the castle with the heart of a roe deer. He gave it to the cruel stepmother, telling her it belonged to Snow White, so he could claim his reward. Highly pleased, the stepmother turned again to the magic mirror, but her hopes were dashed, for the mirror replied, "The loveliest in the land is still Snow White, who lives in the 7 dwarfs' cottage down the forest." The stepmother was beside herself with rage. "She must die!" she screamed, disguising herself as an old pheasant woman, and had poisoned an apple in one of the other's baskets. Then, talking and taking the quickest way to the forest, she crossed the swamp at the edge of the trees. She reached the bank unseen, just as Snow White stood waving goodbye to the 7 dwarfs on the way to the mine. Snow White was in the kitchen cleaning when she heard a knock and sound at the door. "Who's there?" she called suspiciously, remembering the dwarf's advice. "I'm an old pheasant woman selling apples," came the reply. "I don't need any apples, thank you," she said. "But they are beautiful apples and ever so juicy," said the little voice from outside the door. "I'm not supposed to open the door to anyone," said the little girl, who was reluctant to disobey her friends. "And quite right too, good girl. If you promise not to open this up to strangers, then of course you can't buy. You are a good girl indeed." Then the old woman went on. "And as a reward for being good, I am going to make you a gift of one of my apples." Without further thought, Snow White opened the door, and just a tiny crack, just to take the apple. "There, now isn't this a nice apple?" Snow White bit into the fruit, and as she did, she fell to the ground in a faint. The effect of the terrible poison had left her lifeless on the ground. Now chuckling evilly, the wicked stepmother hurried off, but as she ran across a swamp, she tripped and fell into quicksand. She screamed and shrieked and yelled, but no one heard her cries for help, and disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, the dwarfs came out of the mine and find the sky had grown dark and stormy. Loud thunder echoed throughout the valleys and the streaks of lightning ripped in the sky. Worried about Snow White, they ran as quickly as they could down the mountain to the cottage, where they found Snow White laying lifeless and still, the poisoned apple by her side. They did do their best to bring her back around, but it was no use. They wept and wept for a long time, then laid her on a bed of rose petals, and carried her into the forest and put her in a crystal coffin. Each day they had laid a flower there. Then one evening they discovered a young man admiring Snow White's lovely face through the glass. After listening to the story, the prince, for he was, made a suggestion. If you allow me to take her to the castle, I'll call in famous doctors to awaken from this particular sleep. She is so lovely, I'd love to kiss her." He did, as through by magic, the prince's kiss broke the spell, and to everyone's astonishment, Snow White opened her eyes and had amazingly came back to life. Now in love, the prince asked Snow White to marry him, and the dwarves reluctantly said goodbye to Snow White. But from that day on, Snow White lived a happy, great castle. But from time to time, she was drawn back to visit the tiny little cottage in the forest every now and then. And that, my little pretties, was Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs by Grimm's Fairy Tales, or the Brothers Grimm, as we call it. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Shadow Tales, and if you did, please leave a like, hit the subscribe button down below, ring the bell for notifications so you will get updates to my newest uploads. And as always, I will see you all in the next video. Peace out, everyone.